Hi, I'm Tom Davis, Global Sector Lead for Health and Nutrition for World Vision International, based in Geneva. This is an online version of a presentation I originally gave at the 2009 Core Group Fall Meeting on the Science of Persuasion, using persuasion principles and techniques in food security, child survival, and other community development programs. This is part 2 of a series, and you can click on the link on this page to load up the introduction to this series. I gave this when I was working for the TOPS project as a Food for the Hungry employee, their senior director for program quality. I really hope that you enjoy it. Thank you. Remember, we try to repay in kind what another person has provided to us. This is the third principle that we'll be talking about, reciprocation. We are truly much obliged when someone does something for us. We almost also feel an obligation to make a concession to someone who has made a concession to us. Sociologist Alvin Gouldner has said that there is no human society that doesn't adhere to the reciprocation rule. It's just a very natural part of our behavior. And when people do things for us, we would like to return the favor. Richard Leakey said, we are human because our ancestors learned to share their food and their skills in an honored system of obligation. And Vartan Banji mentioned this custom in Pakistan, that on the occasion of marriage, the departing guests are given sweets, and in weighing them out, the hostess may say, "These 5 are yours," meaning what you formerly gave me, and then adds an extra measure saying, "These are mine." And then on the next occasion, she'll receive these back with an additional measure when she later returns, and so on. I remember a proverb in Haiti that said, "Main aller, main venir, fait amitié durer," or hands going, hands coming, make friendships last. So they're basically saying it's a good thing that they will bring you food, and then you're expected that you will take them food back. It's very reciprocal. Another example, 1985, during the Ethiopian famine, there's a $5,000 donation that was sent by the Red Cross between Mexico and famine-stricken Ethiopia. However, that is, it was sent from Ethiopia during the famine to Mexico because they had an earthquake there. You would think during a time of famine, a country wouldn't be that feel obliged to help out another country very far away from them when they had an earthquake. But it happened. And one reason that probably happened is that Mexico sent aid to Ethiopia back in 1935 when it was invaded by Italy. And people remembered that. Also, 70% of the Ethiopian Christians are said to tithe. That's something that I'd heard when I was there that I thought was pretty amazing, that so many people are willing to give of the little that they have. But this, I think, also shows that sort of reciprocity that even happens at a national level. Okay, let's look at a couple of the studies on this. One study was done by Dennis Reagan from Cornell. The subject was asked to rate the quality of paintings that were being shown to the person, along with a Confederate who was named Joe. In case 1, while they're rating these paintings, Joe goes out and brings the subject, the research subject, a 10-cent Coke. That's all the Coke cost at the time the study was done, so it was quite a while ago, when he comes back from a break. And he says, "Oh, I bought a Coke for you as well." In case 2, Joe just comes back from the break, but he doesn't bring anything to the research participant. Joe then asks the subject if he would like to buy raffle tickets from him. So this guy that's given a guy a Coke says, "Would you be willing to buy a couple of raffle tickets? If I sell the most, I get a prize, and they cost 25 cents each. Any would help, and the more you could buy, the better." So what happens in these two different cases? How much did giving him that Coke lead to this guy buying tickets from him later on? Well, subjects in case 1 who had received the Coke bought twice as many tickets as those did in the other case. In case 2, they bought on average 2 tickets, but as many as 7. Subjects who liked Joe better initially, and they had done a bit of a survey on that, bought more tickets. But giving the Coke totally wiped out this relationship effect between liking Joe and buying the tickets. People who said they disliked Joe the most and got a Coke bought just as many tickets as those who said they liked Joe the most and also got a Coke. The rule for reciprocity basically overwhelmed the influence of that other factor, liking the requester. You've probably seen this done before if you're my age by the Hare Krishna Society, how they would have this donation technique. This was, they had remarkable growth back in the 1970s, and partly was from their donation request tactic. They would give the person a book or a flower that would pass them, say, in an airport, at no cost. And the person would then be asked if they'd like to make a donation. And they found by giving them this free flower or book, that person felt some sort of obligation to at least give them something for it and would give them a donation. And then the Hare Krishnas would often fish out the flowers that were later thrown in the nearby trash can because the person didn't really want the flower and use them again. People now choose to avoid rather than withstand that force of gift giving. Often when someone's trying to hand you something in a mall, for example, that's a free gift, you know this tactic and you want to avoid it because you realize you'll have this pressure on you, that you'll feel a certain pressure to be able to respond in kind. So I think this is another example of a technique that has to be used judiciously. And we'll talk about some ways that it could be used. Another example. Many companies often contribute to both the Democratic and the Republican candidates in a race, knowing that after they've made that contribution, they're a lot more likely to get in the door later to talk to them. Free samples. You expose people to the product by giving them a free sample, but also it can create reciprocity. Amway has something they call a bug, which is basically a collection of Amway products carried to the customer's house in a specially designed tray, and they'll leave it with someone and say, just try the products for free. And on average, those customers who received these free products to try purchase half of the total amount of that tray of products. The second part is rejection then retreat. We also feel an obligation to make a concession to someone who has made a concession to us. Some examples of that, a researcher, like for example, they had a researcher pose as represented as the county youth counseling program. And in this first group, college students were asked if they would be willing to chaperone for free a group of juvenile delinquents, youth who are in jail basically, on a day trip to the zoo. 17% of the people asked to do that agreed. And then group number 2, college students were asked to spend 2 hours a week as a counselor to a juvenile delinquent for a minimum of 2 years. And when they refused to do that, if they refused, the student is made the same request as group number 1. Well, could you at least take a trip to the zoo with them? When they did it that way by asking for this bigger thing first, 50% agreed to do so. So that's another example of how this feeling of reciprocity comes into play. That the reciprocity in this example is the person didn't keep insisting that you try to at least do this harder thing, but they came down some and they had a second offer to you of something you could do that was a lot easier. That is also sometimes interpreted as a gift to you, as a grace, as something someone's giving to you that makes it more likely then that you will respond to the second offer more positively. Now, one caveat with that, if that first request is too extreme, too difficult, it doesn't work. You need to keep both requests within reason and both requests within something you expect that some people would be willing to do, not something crazy. Now, an interesting thing about this is that other studies show that people do not feel coerced from this rejection then retreat technique. In fact, people feel more trusting of the requester and more likely to follow through with the commitment that they made, like to go to the zoo or to help out with a juvenile delinquent. They're more likely to follow through with the commitment made when the rejection then retreat technique is used. It was like 85% versus 50% in a similar study. Well, is this ethical? I think it is. To use this technique, I think you need to be prepared to have people to do either of the two requests that you make and keep both requests within reason. It's just a matter of what do you ask for first? And we need to ask for the harder thing first if we'd like to boost the rates of acceptance. Here's another example of that same thing. College students were asked to give blood every 6 weeks for 3 years. And then for those who rejected that offer, they'd ask, well, would you be willing to give a single pint right now? They asked a second group that was randomly selected if they would just give a single pint of blood right now. Those from both groups who agreed to give a pint were then asked for their phone number to receive a call to donate in the future. So how would you predict that these two different scenarios would affect their willingness to donate in the future? Well, if they felt coerced, they'll probably be more likely to do it from group 2. If there wasn't a coercion, who knows how it would turn out. The results were that 84% who agreed to give a pint through that rejection then retreat technique, the ones who were asked to give more blood over a longer period, they agreed to donate later. Only 43% of the others did. So this rejection then retreat tactic spurs people not only to agree to a desired request, but actually to carry out the request, and finally to volunteer to perform further requests. It's quite a powerful technique. And separate studies have shown that those subjects facing someone using this tactic feel most responsible for and most satisfied with the final arrangement. So they feel better about what happened when this technique was used. So a bit of a review of some of the methods we talked about related to this reciprocity principle. Giving gifts and provoking reciprocity. Using free samples. The rejection then retreat technique, which actually fits both this and one of the other principles that we discussed. So those are 3 of the main techniques that can be used when trying to use reciprocity. Some examples of how that could be used. You could have home visitors provide small gifts to beneficiary mothers or farmers as a way to increase trust and create that reciprocity. Offer free samples of zinc or of new foods or of ORS or other things that mothers eventually need to purchase. Or maybe it would be a small sample of improved seeds for farmers that they could try them out and then later ask them if they'd be willing to purchase seeds. Or have home visitors offer to do a favor. For example, help with cooking or childcare for the people that they're visiting 1 month with no other teaching. Just offer to do a favor as one of the visits that is done to the beneficiaries and see what sort of, how that builds that relationship. Or in your curricula, have home visitors ask beneficiaries to commit to do something larger. For example, exclusive breastfeeding for the first 6 months and breastfeeding to 2 years. And when they balk or refuse, ask them to try out something smaller. Say, well, would you be willing to at least try exclusive breastfeeding for the first 6 months of life? Now, we're not used to using a lot of these principles in our everyday work, so it might be hard to think up some of the different ways that you could apply this in your work. I've given you a few examples. You can also download a table with a summary of this principle, the techniques associated with it, and ideas on how to use actually the 2 principles that we presented today by using this link. Note that there are underscores between each word in the title, but if you click it right now, you'll be able to download that document. Also, if you want to do some further reading about this and other principles, these are some of the books that I'd like to suggest. You might want to pause this if you want to write down any of these. The Influence, Science, and Practice is a great one, and also Influence, the Psychology of Persuasion. That one has been translated into Spanish, French, Portuguese, Thai, Indonesian, Arabic, and 20 other languages. And you can see Amazon to look at those different language groups. Fostering Sustainable Behavior is a great community-based social marketing book by Doug McKenzie Moore and Bill Smith. That one is excellent, and I would suggest you read that for some great examples of how to use persuasion. Most of the examples in the book are from the United States, having to do with the environmental movement, but still the same principles apply elsewhere. Two great books, Switch and Made to Stick by Chip and Dan Heath. Dan Heath is an advisor to the Social Behavior Change Task Force and has worked with us some. Those are two of the best books out right now on behavior change and organizational change. Change or Die was one that I mentioned earlier. How We Decide, another book. I've got a book that's out of print that I have a Word version of it called The Human Connection, which is particularly good for Christian organizations that want to see how to apply this in the church. I have that available. Marketing Social Change by Alan Andresen, and also Persuasion Theory and Research. So there's some of the books and other resources available if you want to read more about this. I hope this has been useful for you. You'll find ways to apply it in your work and to help people to make the changes that they want to make in their lives. Thank you.